Poor schoolboy said he'd solve a problem. Professors debated for years until he did. The boy stood at the back of the classroom holding a torn notebook to his chest while adults at the front argued in voices too confident to notice him. Rain tapped against the broken window, and somewhere between those sharp words and the gray sky, a thought formed in his mind that would change everything. His name was Daniel Moore. He was 15 years old, thin for his age, with hair that always fell into his eyes because haircuts cost money his family did not have. His school uniform was faded, the elbows worn shiny from years of use. He sat in the last row, not because teachers told him to, but because he chose it. From there, he could watch quietly. From there, he could think. Daniel lived in a small apartment above a closed grocery store. The sign outside still promised fresh every day, but the lights had been off for years. Inside the apartment, the air always smelled faintly of dust and old cooking oil. His mother worked double shifts cleaning offices at night. His father had left when Daniel was 8, leaving behind a few unpaid bills and a silence that never really went away. Daniel did not have much. No computer of his own, no private desk, no fast internet. His phone was an old model with a cracked screen that only worked when plugged in. But he had questions, endless questions. And once a question entered his mind, it refused to leave. At school, teachers knew him as the quiet one. He did his homework. He never caused trouble. His grades were good, but not perfect. Nothing about him seemed special at first glance. But during lunch breaks, while others played games or scrolled on their phones, Daniel sat alone with library books stacked beside him. He copied pages by hand when he could not borrow them. He read slowly, carefully, as if each sentence mattered. One afternoon, his math teacher turned on a projector for a guest lecture streamed from a nearby university. Daniel almost didn't pay attention at first. University talks usually felt like another world full of words meant for people who already belong there. But then the professor on the screen said something that made Daniel's pen stop moving. For decades, the professor said, pacing confidently, "This problem has been debated. Some believe it can be solved, others believe it cannot. Even today, there is no agreed answer." The screen showed symbols Daniel had seen before, equations he half recognized, a problem famous enough to be discussed in journals, conferences, and late-night debates among experts. The teacher paused the video to explain its importance, her voice full of admiration. "Many great minds have tried," she said. "Some of the best professors in the world. No final solution yet." Daniel felt his chest tighten, not with fear, but with something closer to excitement. His eyes followed every symbol. His mind moved faster than his hand could write. That evening at home, the problem followed him. It sat with him while he ate instant noodles. It hovered in his thoughts as he listened to his mother quietly rub her tired hands at the kitchen table. "You're quiet today," she said gently. "I'm thinking," Daniel replied, "about school." He nodded. That was easier than explaining the rest. Later that night, lying on his mattress on the floor, Daniel stared at the ceiling. The cracked plaster looked like shapes if he focused long enough. His phone buzzed as the battery struggled to stay alive. He reopened a blurry photo he had secretly taken of the problem from the projector screen. He traced the logic again and again. Something felt off. Not wrong exactly. Just incomplete. "What if they're looking at it the wrong way?" he whispered to the darkroom. What if brilliance could come from the least expected place? Daniel sat up, heart beating faster. He grabbed his notebook and began writing, crossing out lines, rewriting them. His hands shook, not from cold, but from fear. Fear of being foolish. Fear of dreaming too big. Would you dare to challenge experts who never agreed with each other? He paused, staring at the page. His pencil hovered in the air. Then very quietly, as if afraid the world might hear him, Daniel spoke. "I think I know the answer." The rain outside grew louder, and somewhere far away, arguments continued in rooms Daniel had never entered. But in that small apartment, with nothing but a weak light and a cracked notebook, a line had been crossed. Khai woke up before the sun, not because he wanted to, but because the room never stayed quiet for long. Their home was one narrow space behind a small repair shop. The walls were thin. When it rained, water made a soft tapping sound on the metal roof. When trucks passed, the whole place shook like a tired body, trying not to fall apart. He lay still for a moment listening. His little sister Mina breathed with a tiny whistle. His mother moved around in the dark, careful not to wake Mina. The smell of rice and cheap instant broth floated in the air. Khai's stomach felt empty, but his head was already full. The problem, the bridge pattern. Question the one the professors debated, the one that had no clear answer. He saw the chalkboard in his mind again. He saw the sharp lines. He saw the symbols like small locked doors. He sat up and reached for his school shirt. The collar was worn and slightly stretched. He washed his face with cold water from a plastic bucket. The water bit his skin and made him blink hard. His mother looked at him from the small stove. Her hair was tied back. She wore the same faded shirt she wore most days. "You're up early," she said softly. "I couldn't sleep," Khai answered. She nodded like she understood more than he had said. On the table were 2 boiled eggs, one cracked from the pot. Mina would need one. His mother would pretend she wasn't hungry. Khai reached for an egg, then stopped. "Mom," he said, "I can eat later." His mother's eyes narrowed a little, not angry, just tired. "No," she said. "You eat now. School is long. Your brain needs it." He took the egg. He tried to eat slowly like it was normal, like he did not feel guilty for every bite. Across the room, his father's cough came from behind a hanging cloth that served as a door. His father, Mr. Day, used to carry heavy boxes at the market. Now his back was injured, and his work came in small pieces, fixing things, doing odd jobs, taking whatever someone offered. Khai walked over quietly. "Dad," he whispered. The cloth moved and his father's face appeared. His eyes looked older than his real age. His hands were rough. He tried to sit up and pain flashed in his expression, quick and hidden. "You're going?" his father asked. "Yes," Khai said. His father held out a small coin pouch. It was almost empty. "I have bus money," Khai lied. His father looked at him for a long moment. Then he pulled the pouch back. "You're a bad liar," his father said, but his voice was warm. "Come here." Khai stepped closer. His father pressed a folded paper into his hand. It was not money. It was a page torn from an old notebook filled with numbers and little drawings. "I found this in the trash behind the tutoring center," his father said. "Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's something. I thought of you." Kai's throat tightened. He opened the page and saw fragments of math notes. Nothing complete, but the handwriting was clean, and one diagram looked like the bridge shapes from the professor's board. "It's something," Khai said, voice quiet. "Thank you." His father nodded, then coughed again and turned away. Khai folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his bag like it was a treasure. Outside, the air was cold and gray. The street smelled like wet concrete and cooking oil. Khai walked to school because he did not have bus money, not really. He walked fast to save time. On the way, he passed shops with bright signs and clean glass windows. He passed students stepping out of cars, laughing, holding warm drinks. A few boys in his grade stood by the gate wearing neat shoes and backpacks that looked expensive. One of them, June, saw Khai and smirked. "Hey, genius," June called. "Did you solve the professor's puzzle yet?" The others laughed. Khai kept walking. His cheeks burned, but he did not speak. He had learned that words could be used like stones. If he picked them up, someone would throw them harder. Inside the classroom, the heater did not work well. The windows were fogged. The teacher wrote on the board explaining a simple lesson about functions, but Khai barely heard it. His hand moved copying notes, but his mind drifted back to the question. At lunch, he ate rice with a little kimchi. The portion was small. Mina would need more at home. He sat near the end of a table where nobody complained if he stayed silent. A girl named Sora sat across from him. She was quiet too. She watched him take out his notebook and write during lunch. You always write, she said. Khai looked up. I just think better when I write. What are you writing? She asked. He hesitated, his chest tightened. If he said it, it would sound crazy, like he was pretending to be important. It's a problem, he said carefully. A hard one. Sora nodded slowly. Hard problems are better than easy ones. Khai almost smiled. It was the simplest support he had heard all day. After lunch, he went to the library, but the school library had old books, and half the computers were broken. The internet worked only sometimes, and even then, it was slow and blocked many sites. He sat at a corner desk with a dusty book on basic proofs. The pages smelled like paper and age. He traced sentences with his finger to stay focused. Assume the opposite. Find the contradiction. He whispered the words under his breath like a prayer. After classes ended, other students left quickly. Some had clubs. Some had tutors waiting. Khai walked home again. On the way, he stopped by a small convenience store to look at the newspaper stand. He did not buy anything. He just scanned headlines, hoping to see something about the university problem. Nothing. At home, Mina ran to him and hugged his waist. Opa, she said. Mom said you can help me with homework. Khai lifted her gently, pretending he was strong. Okay, he said. Show me. He helped Mina with simple spelling, then washed dishes while his mother prepared dinner. His father sat nearby, trying to fix a broken fan with a screwdriver. The fan made a weak clicking sound like it was tired too. Later, when Mina fell asleep, Khai took out his notebook again. The small room was quiet except for his father's breathing and the soft hum of streetlights outside. His mother noticed. You're studying again, she said, sitting beside him. Khai kept his eyes on the page. I have to. For exams, she asked. He swallowed. This was the moment where he could hide again, where he could say yes and be safe. But his heart felt too heavy to hold the truth inside. No, he said softly. Not for exams. His mother waited. There's a problem, Khai continued. A famous one. Professors argue about it. Some say one thing, some say another. Nobody finishes it. His mother blinked, then looked down at his notebook. The symbols meant nothing to her, but she saw his serious face. And you want to solve it, she asked. Kai's hands trembled a little. I think I might have a way, but it's messy, and maybe I'm wrong. His mother's voice lowered. People will laugh. Khai nodded. I know. She touched his shoulder, gentle, careful, like his bones were glass. You're scared, she said. Yes, Khai admitted. His mother sighed. When I was your age, I was scared to speak to my teachers. I was scared to ask for help. I thought being quiet would keep me safe. She looked at him. But safety is not a life. Khai stared at her. He did not expect those words from her, not from someone who worked and worried and counted coins. His father looked up from the broken fan. Son, he said, if you do it fully. Don't do it halfway and then regret it. Kai's throat tightened again. But what if I waste time, Khai asked. What if I should focus on exams and getting a job? His father's eyes held his. Time is already hard for us, his father said. But your mind is your own. Don't let poverty steal even that. Khai looked down at the notebook. His pencil hovered above the page. He imagined the university hall again. The chalk, the professors, the laughter, the doubt. Then he imagined Mina growing older. He imagined his mother still counting coins. He imagined himself still walking past the tutoring center, still looking through windows at lives he could not enter. Something in him stiffened like a spine finally straightening. He opened the torn page his father had found. He placed it beside his own notes. He began to rewrite his ideas cleanly line by line, even though his hands shook. He worked until his eyes burned. He erased. He rewrote. He whispered steps aloud, testing each one like a weak bridge with his foot before stepping on it. At some point, the room got colder. The night deepened. His mother fell asleep, sitting up her head against the wall. His father's tools lay quiet beside him. Khai stayed awake, not because he was sure, but because he could not stop. And when the first pale light of morning began to touch the edge of the window, Khai sat back, exhaled slowly, and stared at the page in front of him. His idea was not a dream anymore. It was a plan. He looked at his notebook and whispered, barely audible, "I'm going to work on this seriously." No excuses. He closed the notebook carefully like it was something fragile and important. Then he stood up, feeling fear in his chest, but something else too, something stronger. Decision. The university building stood on the other side of the city, tall and clean, with glass walls that reflected the sky. Inside, the air smelled of coffee paper and confidence. This was where arguments lived for years, without ever truly ending. In one lecture hall, three professors stood around a long table covered with printed papers. Their voices overlapped, sharp but controlled. "You're ignoring the boundary condition," Professor Hans said, tapping a page with his finger. "I'm not ignoring it," Professor Lewis replied. "I'm saying it doesn't apply the way you think it does." A third man, Professor Adler, leaned back in his chair. His arms were crossed. His face showed the tired patience of someone who had repeated the same conversation too many times. "This is exactly why the problem is unresolved," Adler said. "Every approach collapses at the same point. The bridge pattern question had followed them for years. It appeared in journals, disappeared, then returned again under different names. Young researchers tried to impress their mentors with bold claims. Older professors defended their positions like land they had owned for decades. None of them agreed. Graduate students filled the room, sitting quietly, watching the exchange like a tennis match. They took notes, but few dared to speak. Status mattered here. Reputation mattered. A wrong question could follow you longer than silence. Professor Hahn turned to the room. "Any thoughts?" No one spoke. The silence was thick, heavy with caution. Across the city, in a small, dim room, Khai bent over his notebook. His table was a wooden board placed on two stacked boxes. The light came from a single bulb that flickered when someone used electricity nearby. He read the same lines again, his finger following the logic slowly. He did not know the names of famous professors. He did not know who had published what. He only knew the problem itself, and the problem to him felt human, like a story with a missing sentence. He imagined the bridge shapes the professors argued about. Everyone assumed the same starting point. Everyone accepted the same limits. Khai questioned that part quietly, almost shyly, as if asking permission from the page. What if the pattern doesn't repeat the way they think? He murmured. He tested it with simple numbers first, then larger ones. Each time the results surprised him in the same way. Not perfect, but consistent. At school a week later, the math teacher mentioned the problem again in passing. "It's a good example of how difficult real research can be," she said. "Even experts don't always find answers." Khai raised his hand before he could stop himself. The room went still. "Yes," the teacher said, surprised. Khai swallowed. His voice came out quieter than he wanted. What if the assumption at the start is wrong?" A few students turned to look at him. June snorted. The teacher frowned slightly, not angry, just puzzled. "Which assumption?" Khai opened his notebook. His hands trembled, but he forced himself to speak. "The repeating structure," he said. "Everyone treats it as fixed. But if it shifts based on scale, the contradiction disappears." The room stayed silent for a beat. Then someone laughed. "That's what all the professors tried," June said. "You think you're smarter than them?" Khai felt heat rise in his face. He wanted to disappear, but the idea was already out there, fragile and exposed. The teacher did not laugh. She walked closer and looked at his notebook. Her eyes moved across the page slowly. "This is interesting," she said carefully. "But this isn't something I can judge." She straightened. "Where did you read this?" "I didn't," Khai said. "I thought about it." That answer earned more laughter. After class, the teacher stopped him at the door. Khai, she said quietly, this problem is dangerous. Not personally, academically. People don't like outsiders touching it, I know, Khai said. She hesitated. If you're serious, you should write it clearly. Very clearly. Or no one will even listen. That night, Khai rewrote everything again. He removed words that sounded uncertain. He added steps where he thought someone might doubt him. He imagined someone smarter than him trying to tear it apart. Across the city, Professor Lewis sat alone in his office. He stared at a whiteboard filled with erased lines and half-ideas. His phone buzzed with another email rejecting a proposed paper revision. He sighed. We're stuck, he muttered. At that exact moment, Khai closed his notebook and leaned back against the wall. His head hurt. His eyes burned. But something felt solid now, like ground under his feet. His idea did not fit the professor's arguments. It went around them. And that, he knew, was the most dangerous part. Khai did not tell anyone at first that he was going to finish it. He woke before dawn every day and worked while the room was quiet. He worked after school when others rested. He worked late into the night, stopping only when his eyes refused to stay open. The notebook grew thick with crossed-out pages. Some nights nothing worked. He would stare at the numbers until they blurred, then press his palms into his eyes and breathe slowly. The idea that once felt clear now felt stupid. Too simple. Too bold. Who do you think you are? He whispered to himself. On those nights he almost tore the pages out, almost closed the notebook for good. But then he would remember the professors arguing on the screen. So sure, so divided, and he would remember the small gap he saw between their words. He opened old textbooks from the library. Most were outdated. Some pages were missing. He copied what he could by hand because the books could not leave the building. When the librarian announced closing time, Khai begged quietly. 5 more minutes, he said. Sometimes she agreed. Sometimes she didn't. At home, the internet cut in and out. Articles took minutes to load, then failed. Khai learned patience the hard way. When he could not read, he thought. When he could not think, he rewrote. He taped scrap paper to the wall. Diagrams covered the space above his mattress. Mina asked him one night, Opa, why are there bridges on the wall? Khai smiled tiredly. They help me think. His father watched silently. One evening, he finally asked, how close are you? Khai hesitated. Close enough to be scared. That was the truth. One night, everything collapsed. Khai followed his steps again and again, and suddenly the logic broke. A contradiction appeared where there was none before. His chest tightened. His hands shook. No, he whispered. No, no. He erased fast. He rewrote faster. The contradiction stayed. His breath came short. His heart pounded. Hours of work felt like lies. He slammed the notebook shut and stood up so fast the chair fell over. I'm wrong, he said aloud. I was stupid. His mother stirred. Khai, she murmured. He grabbed his jacket and stepped outside before she could stop him. The night air was cold. Streetlights buzzed. The city felt wide and empty. Khai walked with no direction, his hands clenched in his pockets. What if they were right? What if the problem was impossible? What if this was just a poor boy's dream pretending to be math? He stopped at a small bridge over a dark canal. The water below moved slowly, quietly. A bridge. He stared at it, breathing hard. And then he saw it. Not the numbers, not the equations. The structure. The professors treated the bridge like it could only be crossed one way. Khai had assumed that too without noticing. The contradiction existed because he had followed them there. What if the crossing changes direction, he whispered. He ran home. He reopened the notebook with shaking hands. He rewrote the step carefully, slowly. The contradiction dissolved. The logic held. Khai laughed once, a short, broken sound, half relief, half disbelief. Tears blurred the page, but he wiped them away and kept writing. By sunrise, the solution stood complete. Not perfect, but whole. He spent the next 2 days rewriting everything cleanly. No rushed notes, no messy arrows. Each step explained like he was talking to someone who wanted to misunderstand him. When he finished, he stared at the final page for a long time. Now came the hardest part, being seen. His teacher helped him find an academic email address for the university department. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. They may ignore you, she warned. I know, Khai said. They may be unkind. I know, she looked at him. Once you send this, you can't take it back. Khai thought of his family asleep in the small room. He thought of the notebook pages pulled from trash. He thought of every time someone laughed without listening. I don't want it back, he said. He pressed send. The email left the screen quietly. No sound, no sign, just a small message traveling toward people who had never imagined him. Khai leaned back in the chair, his hands trembling. Whatever happened next, he had crossed his bridge. The first reply arrived 3 days later. It was short. Thank you for your interest. Due to volume, we are unable to review unsolicited submissions. Khai stared at the screen. His chest tightened, but he did not feel surprised. He had expected this. Still, the words felt cold like a door closing without even looking at who knocked. Another reply came the next day. This problem has been addressed extensively in the literature. Please consult existing work. No name, no signature. Khai closed his eyes and leaned back against the wall. The light flickered above him. Mina laughed somewhere in the room, chasing a paper ball. Life moved on untouched by his attempt. At school, June found out. I heard you emailed the university, June said loudly during lunch. What happened? Did they give you a medal? A few students laughed. Khai kept eating. His hand shook slightly, but he forced it to stay steady. They didn't read it. June continued. Of course they didn't. You think professors care about kids like us? Khai did not answer. That night he did not open the notebook right away. He washed dishes slowly. He helped Mina brush her teeth. He listened to his father cough in the next room. When everyone slept, Khai sat on the floor with the notebook closed in front of him. For the first time since starting, he thought seriously about stopping. Maybe this was the sign. Maybe effort was not enough. Maybe the world had rules and one of them was simple. Some voices were too small to hear. His phone buzzed, another email. He opened it with no hope. This one was longer. I glanced at your submission, it began. Your writing lacks formal structure, and your references are insufficient. However, one step in your argument does not align with the standard assumption. Could you clarify why you abandoned it? Khai read the sentence again. And again, someone had glanced. Someone had noticed. His heart began to race. His fingers hovered over the screen. He wanted to explain everything at once, to pour weeks of thought into a single message. Instead, he breathed slowly and typed carefully. He explained the shift, the direction change, the reason the contradiction vanished. He attached a revised version, clearer, slower, stronger. He sent it. 2 days passed, then 4. At the university, Professor Lewis sat at his desk, rereading the student's email. He had almost deleted it. Almost. But something about that one step bothered him. It was wrong by the rules. And yet, it worked. He pulled out an old notebook from his shelf and tested it himself. The result matched. He frowned. This shouldn't work, he muttered. He tried again with different values. Same outcome. Lewis forwarded the email to Professor Han with a short note. Look at step 4. Ignore the rest for now. Han replied an hour later. This is naive. Then 30 minutes after that. But interesting. Days later, Khai received another message. We are reviewing your clarification. Please be patient. Patient. Khai smiled weakly at the word. He had learned patience from slow internet, from empty wallets, from waiting for his mother to come home at night. He could wait, but waiting did not stop fear. At school, he began to feel eyes on him. Not admiration, curiosity mixed with doubt. His teacher asked him quietly after class. Any response? Yes, Khai said. They asked a question. She raised her eyebrows. That's more than most get. At home, his father noticed the change. You're walking lighter, his father said. Khai shrugged. Maybe I'm just tired. But at night when he lay awake, doubt crept in again. What if they found a flaw? What if the solution only worked in narrow cases? What if this small attention made the rejection hurt more? Another email arrived. Then another. The tone changed. Can you justify this transition more formally? Have you considered edge cases? Your argument implies a broader result. Is that intended? Khai answered each one carefully. He checked every line again. He found a small mistake in wording and corrected it before they could point it out. He slept less. He ate less. But he felt alive in a way he never had before. At the university, discussions shifted. This kid is persistent, Professor Adler said during a meeting. Persistent doesn't mean right, Han replied. Lewis stayed quiet. He had run the logic 5 times now. Each time it held. One afternoon, an email arrived that made Khai's hands go numb. We would like you to present your reasoning in a small departmental session. This is not a guarantee of acceptance. Khai read it aloud to his parents. His mother covered her mouth with her hand. Present, she whispered. 2 professors, his father laughed, once short and disbelieving. Khai nodded, terrified. Me. Silence filled the room. His mother hugged him tightly. No matter what happens, she said, we are proud. Khai swallowed hard. Who gets to decide where genius is allowed to exist? The session was scheduled for the following week. The night before, Khai barely slept. He rewrote his explanation again, speaking it aloud softly, making sure each word was simple, clear, honest. At the university, professors gathered, some curious, some annoyed. A chair was set at the front. A glass of water waited. This is unusual, someone muttered. A schoolboy, Lewis, looked at the door. Unusual doesn't mean impossible, he said. When Khai stepped into the room, his knees shook. The space felt too big, too clean, too quiet. But he carried his notebook like a shield, and for the first time the room listened. Not fully, not yet, but enough. And that was when everyone began to realize that the problem they had argued about for years might finally be ending. The room was quiet in a way Khai had never experienced before. Not the silence of night at home, not the silence of being ignored. This was a waiting silence, a sharp one. Around the long table sat 12 professors. Some leaned back with arms crossed. Some held pens but did not write. A few looked openly bored. Professor Lewis sat near the center, hands folded. Professor Han stared at Khai without expression. Khai stood near the board, his notebook open, his fingers tight around the edges. You may begin, someone said. Khai nodded. His mouth felt dry. My idea starts where the standard assumption begins, he said. His voice shook slightly, but he continued. Everyone treats the bridge structure as fixed. I don't. A pen tapped once on the table. Khai drew a simple shape on the board. He kept it basic. He had learned that clarity mattered more than cleverness. When the scale changes, he said, the crossing changes. If you allow that, the contradiction disappears. Professor Han raised a hand. That violates the core constraint. Khai swallowed. He had expected this. It violates the wording, Khai said carefully. Not the logic. A few heads turned. He continued step by step. He did not rush. Each line followed from the last. He spoke like he spoke to Mina when explaining homework. Slow, gentle, no pride. A professor interrupted. You're assuming continuity here. Yes, Khai replied, but only locally, not globally. Lewis leaned forward. Show us, he said. Khai turned back to the board. His hand shook as he wrote, but the numbers stayed steady. He filled the space, carefully checking each line as he went. A minute passed, then another. No one laughed. Professor Adler cleared his throat. Run it again. Different values. Khai nodded and did exactly that. The result stayed the same. Someone whispered, "That shouldn't hold." But it did. Professor Hahn stood up. He walked closer, eyes sharp. "You're saying we were wrong for years?" he asked. Khai shook his head quickly. "No, sir. I'm saying you were right within a frame, but the frame was smaller than you thought." The room went very still. Lewis exhaled slowly. "That's precise." They tested it again and again. Each professor tried to break it from a different angle. Each time the logic bent, but did not break. Sweat rolled down Kai's back. His legs ached from standing, but his mind felt calm, clear, like he had already crossed this moment many times alone in his room. Finally, Professor Adler sat back. "It's solved," he said quietly. No one answered. "It's solved," he repeated louder. Not elegantly, not beautifully, but correctly. Silence filled the room like a held breath. Then Professor Hahn spoke again, his voice lower now. "Why hasn't anyone seen this before?" Khai hesitated. Then he answered honestly. "Because it looks too simple," he said, "and because no one asked why the assumption had to stay." No one argued. Lewis stood up. "We'll need to publish a correction," he said, "and a recognition." He turned to Khai. "Where did you learn to think like this?" Kai's voice cracked for the first time. "At home. Alone." The room changed. It wasn't loud. There was no applause. Just a quiet shift like a door opening somewhere deep inside the walls. For years, this problem had belonged to the powerful. Now it belonged to the truth. And the truth had come from a boy no one had noticed. The news did not explode all at once. It moved slowly like water finding cracks. First, an internal memo circulated through the department. Then a revised paper draft appeared. Then a quiet announcement was made on a university page that few people followed. But inside Kai's life, everything felt loud. He sat on the bus home from the university, holding his notebook on his lap, staring at nothing. The city passed by the window, but it felt unreal, like a picture behind glass. Solved. The words still did not fit in his mouth. When he opened the door to the apartment, Mina ran toward him. "Opa," she shouted. "Did you win?" Khai laughed softly. "I don't know if it's winning." His mother stood behind Mina, wiping her hands on a towel. She looked at his face and understood immediately that something had changed. "They listened," Khai said. She pressed her hand to her chest and sat down slowly. They listened. His father stood up from his chair, moving carefully. "They said it works," Khai continued. "They said, it's solved." For a moment, no one spoke. Then his father laughed, a deep, surprised sound that turned into a cough halfway through. His mother covered her face and cried without sound. Mina clapped, even though she did not fully understand why. That night they ate together in silence, but it was a different silence now. Lighter, almost shy. The next week, Kai's teacher called him to the front of the class. "This is Khai," she said. "He has done something very rare." Some students stared, some whispered. June did not meet his eyes. After class, Sora stopped him in the hallway. "You solved it?" she asked. Khai shrugged. "I think so," she smiled. "I knew you would." At the university, the mood shifted too. Professor Hahn requested another meeting. This time his tone was different. "You were right," he said, not easily but clearly. "And I was wrong to dismiss you." Khai nodded, unsure what to say. Lewis helped him prepare a formal write-up. He corrected structure, added references, but he did not touch the core idea. "This is yours," Lewis said. "I won't smooth it until it sounds like us." An invitation arrived for a small conference, then another for a scholarship interview. The words felt heavy on the screen. Khai reread them again and again. At home, his mother started smiling more. His father talked less about money and more about plans. Mina told her friends, "My brother fixes big problems." One evening, Khai sat alone on the mattress, notebook open but untouched. For the first time in months, he did not feel the need to prove anything. He thought about the nights he almost quit, the bridge over the canal, the email that almost went unread. He realized something then. The hardest part had not been the math. It had been believing his voice mattered. A week later, Khai stood outside the university building again. This time he was not invisible. A student held the door open for him. A professor nodded in greeting. The glass walls reflected the sky just the same. But he was different now. Not louder, not richer, not suddenly confident in everything. Just seen. As he walked down the hallway, Khai felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Hope. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that stays. A year later, Khai sat at a long wooden table in a bright room filled with students. The room was not fancy. The chairs were old. The whiteboard had stains that never fully erased. But the windows were open and sunlight rested on the pages in front of him. Khai leaned over a notebook explaining a problem to a younger student. No, he said gently, smiling. Don't rush. Follow the step. Ask why it works. The student nodded, eyes wide, holding the pencil too tight. Outside the room, life moved on. Cars passed. People hurried. Somewhere professors argued again about new questions that had no answers yet. Khai still studied. He still walked more than he rode buses. He still shared meals with his family in their small home. Poverty had not disappeared overnight, but something had changed forever. When Mina asked him one evening, "Opa, are you a genius now?" Khai laughed and shook his head. No, he said, I just didn't stop. Sometimes he returned to the canal bridge at night. He stood there quietly watching the water move beneath it. The bridge looked ordinary, almost boring, but Khai knew what it meant to cross something that once felt impossible. He no longer felt small when he walked into rooms with titles on doors. He no longer assumed silence was safer than truth. And when he saw quiet students sitting at the back of classrooms, he noticed them. Really noticed them. Because he had been one of them. The world often believes that intelligence wears a uniform, that wisdom must come from certain buildings, certain voices, certain lives. But real understanding does not ask for permission. It only asks for honesty, patience, and courage. When we ignore unheard voices, we don't just miss people, we miss answers. And when we learn to listen, even the oldest problems can finally rest. If this story moved you, take a moment to like the video. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about courage, humility, and quiet strength. Share this with someone who feels unseen right now. And remember, sometimes the answer is already here, just waiting to be heard.